delighted to welcome you here today, and I anticipate we're going to have people kind of trickling in and out all day, which is great. And as we've already said, this is our third annual Fall Summit, offering hope, reducing stigma, and supporting individuals with serious mental illness. I want to thank our partner for the event, the St. Joseph County Public Library. Your staff in this space is really a tremendous resource for the community, so thank you to the library for that. I also want to thank our planning committee for their hard work organizing today's summit. Their names and organizations are listed in the program, but if you're in the room and would like to wave your hand, we'd like to thank you for being part of the planning committee. I want to thank our event sponsors, so Bowen Health, HealthLink, Anthem, MDWise, the City of South Bend, AARC, and SitePoint all have sponsored this event so we can make it free of charge to everybody. You can learn about these resources and some other awesome organizations by visiting the ballroom. We put together a resource guide. Our Notre Dame intern helped put together this resource guide that's listing organizations who were part of the event, part of the planning, and most of them are in the ballroom, so please visit them during the breaks. We will be recording the summit and uploading the recording to our YouTube channel in the next week or so, so anyone can see what they missed, and you're certainly welcome to share that. It's publicly available. So we're focusing our time together this afternoon on the realities of our community members living with serious mental illness, or SMI. The history of how individuals with serious mental illness have been treated across the United States and really internationally is heartbreaking. We hear more, we'll hear more in tomorrow's keynote about the lived experience. And I do want to share, we're part of this event. What makes it special is that we do have people who are going to share their lived experiences. And that can be intimidating, it can be scary. And so I'm going to share my own family experience, just to kind of, be transparent about things. My maternal grandmother, who lived over 100 years ago, had a breakdown and was institutionalized for that breakdown and spent 50 years of her life institutionalized. So the history of how we treat people who have breakdowns or how who've had really serious mental illness is tragic, and it really is something that we hopefully never repeat, because we just didn't know 100 years ago what we know now. So when you come from a family that's not wealthy, when you don't have access to resources, what you have available to you is very different. And that's very true. It was true 100 years ago, it's true now. So what we know is that, all of us in this room probably have some family history or some history of friends with serious mental illness or mental health challenges. So no family is immune from struggles. And we want to be really just aware and great compassionate for the people in the room with lived experience, that as they share their stories, we definitely want to just be supportive in our response to them. So we're in a different time, and we know a lot more about mental illness and effective treatment options. And we know that support from the community can make it possible for people with serious mental illness to be successful and have a good quality of life. But stigma and fear of serious mental illness continue. And this afternoon, we're going to hear from individuals with lived experience who are willing to share their experience and their perspective. We want you to know that we see you and we thank you for being part of this conversation. And our hope is that all of you learn something new today, gain an appreciation of some aspect or support for treatment, and hopefully will leave here inspired. So I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Tamara McCoy. Tamara is a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Indiana. She's a graduate of Andrews University with over 10 years of experience in the field of mental health, and she's currently pursuing a Ph.D. in developmental psychology with a specialty in health psychology. Tamara is originally from Barbados, and her heart has always been for underserved populations, such as the unhoused and individuals suffering with serious mental illness. A major focus of her life's work has been in the areas of trauma and crisis, anxiety, depression, and women's issues. Tamara was previously employed at the Center for the Homeless for 8 years before transitioning to the position of licensed behavioral health professional at the Indiana Health Center. In addition, she teaches part-time at Indiana University and runs a small private practice. In her spare time, she enjoys spending quality time with friends and family, working out, traveling, and trying different foods. So we'd like to welcome Tamara to the stage and her friend Lynn.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the introduction. I am going to introduce my friend Lynn. I met Lynn, I believe, 2 years ago, and ever since we met, we have a story. This is my story. Lynn and I have a story, and it started off a little, I would say, rocky, but we had a little challenge in the beginning. But Lynn and I worked through that, and we've remained friends ever since. When I asked her to speak with me, she was very nervous, as she is, and I am too. But she said, Tamara, I'm going to speak from the heart. And so that's what it's going to be today. It's going to be a heart-to-heart. The first part of this presentation, I'm going to give some information. And then the second part, I'm going to sit with Lynn, and we're going to hear from Lynn's perspective. Okay. Okay, so today let me see the hands of all those who love stories, first of all. Everybody. So we're going to be talking about stories today, different stories. But before we even get into the stories of others, I want you to look into your own story. We're going to start there. This is my story. This is the picture's a little blurry, so I apologize for that. It's the Barbados Psychiatric Hospital. This is where my story began over 30 years ago. My mother worked there when I was a child. I was under the age of 10, so you can probably start to guess my age. And I loved going there every evening after school. And that's where I started to develop this love for individuals who were struggling with serious mental illness. And I don't know where it came from. My mother always said it was a gift. But that passion and that love, it grew over the years. And this is over 30 years. And I still have that passion. I still have that love. This is a population that's really dear to me. I would say this is a population that has my heart. And this is a population that when I struggle with acceptance, they accepted me. And so today, my only hope is that I can tell their story and really do it justice. So we will get started. Okay, what is your story? I just told a little bit about my story. I want you to think about your story. When we read a story, how many people have ever torn out all the pages that they didn't like, or if the story was going in a direction they didn't like, how many people tore those pages out just to keep the good parts? Okay, well, Lynn, thank you for your honesty. But usually when we read a story is comprised of different parts. It has the good parts, it has the bad parts, it has the villain, it has all these different elements that make the story up. And I remember loving to read as a child and sometimes being up super late because I wanted to see how the story ends. How many of you here have parts of your story that you wish you could kind of tear the pages out? Yeah, I do too. But the thing about that is that even those parts of our stories that we wish we could tear the pages out, they serve a purpose. And I always hear life makes sense when you kind of look back. I may be saying it wrong, but when you look back at your story, even those hard parts, they all connect to who you are today. So I want you to look at a part of your story where you really needed grace and you really needed compassion. I want you to take a moment to look for that. And as we begin to speak today, I want you to extend that same compassion that you have for yourself onto the individuals that we're going to speak about. So I have just going to show the elements of a story while I tell another story. So I work right now at the Indiana Health Centers, and I heard a beautiful story from someone, and I asked her, can I share this? And this was someone who was going through traumatic grief. And of course she said, yes, you can share it, because I wish that someone explained it to me this way when I was going through my own grief. So she said, each of us have a cup. So we're gonna imagine, you're gonna take this, each of us have a cup. This is a cup, this is my cup. And she said, but each cup, each individual's cup is a different size. And she says, and it has nothing to do with age. And then she referenced a relative, and she said she has a lake. And she said, but what happens when you go through grief? Now she's speaking about grief, but we can talk about challenges too. When you go through grief, when you experience grief, it's almost like someone has a pitcher and you just imagine somebody's pouring into this, right? So she said, but what happens when you go through and you lose somebody else? The pitcher is pouring again. And she said, it can overflow. And she drew that for me. And she said, but she said, that was my experience. Mine almost overflowed. But what I had was family who saw it was about to overflow and who would come in and basically support. And that's the power of support, you know? And I wanted to, as I was thinking about this presentation today, I really wanted to open with that, because individuals with serious mental illness, they have cups too. And sometimes life can hand you trauma after trauma after trauma, right? And it keeps pouring. And the thing about that, sometimes they don't have the support. They don't have someone to say, that is about to overflow, let me step in. And then sometimes the result is serious mental illness. So these are just the elements of a story. So you have the plot, you have the main events in your story, you have the setting, you have the characters, so you got the good, you got the bad, you have the point of view, and you have the conflict, the big obstacle, the challenges in life. And I want to use a little creativity and go back to the plot, right? The plot of the story, I'm going to say, is the purpose. So everybody's story in here has a purpose. Individuals struggling with serious mental illness, their story has a purpose as well. So self-compassion, right? And as we start to get into and talk about mental illness right now, we're going to practice this for ourselves, and then we're going to practice it for others. So this is a little intervention that I do with my patients all the time. And it's just to acknowledge your pain. So we're not going to try to shut it down. So you're going to acknowledge those hard parts of your story, but you're going to respond to it with kindness. And as we hear the parts of individuals' stories that are painful, we're going to respond to them with kindness as well. So self-compassion involves acknowledging your pain, your hurt, your suffering, and treating yourself with kindness, care, and support. So that's what we will be doing today. But what exactly is serious mental illness? What exactly is it? Anybody wants to give their definition of serious mental illness? And I should say it's going to be a little interactive. Anybody? When you hear serious mental illness, what do you think of? Yes. Trauma. What's another word? Anybody? Pardon? Trauma. I love that you said trauma, by the way. I really love that, because we're gonna go there. Anybody else? When you hear a serious mental illness, what's the word that comes to your mind?
ACEs.
Pardon?
ACEs, like
ACEs. ACEs connected to trauma too. Yes, thank you.
Being alone.
Being alone. All of these are really, really good definitions. And they're all in the presentation too. So thank you for sharing that. So I'll just read this because it was a direct quote. But serious mental illness is defined as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder resulting in serious functional impairment, which practically interferes with your life, your daily functioning. So no, people with serious mental illness, they're not lazy. They're not trying to be in bed on purpose, right? They really are struggling. And we have some examples here. So we have major depressive disorder, depression. We have schizophrenia, some of the popular ones, bipolar disorder. We have post-traumatic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and we have borderline personality disorder. So those are some of them. I'm sure most of you have heard of those before. So this presentation, we're gonna take a walk in somebody else's shoes. So to take a walk in somebody else's shoes, sometimes we gotta like kind of try to feel what they feel. So we're gonna examine a little of these symptoms. So this is what a day in their lives could be like, right? The first one, and I'm not gonna go through all, but the first one is a feeling of hopelessness or worthlessness, depressed mood, poor self-esteem, or guilt. And I can definitely say in the work that I do, this is one of the most common ones, from children right up to adults. They struggle with this. The next one, I'll go to social withdrawal because somebody spoke about being alone, right? That comes with serious mental illness. A lot of the times there's no support. And even when there is support, it's very difficult for them to reach out for that support. Let's see another one. This was one that I noticed at the Center for the Homeless, where people had all of these aches and pains. Everybody had a backache, you know, people have all these headaches, they have all these aches and pains, but there's really no clear explanation. And that's one that comes with serious mental illness as well. Reckless or impulsive behaviors, that's another one. And so when we see individuals behaving recklessly, or we see them doing things that we think they should not be doing, it's so easy to judge the symptom, especially when we have no idea what's going on below the surface. So those are just some. We have excessive worrying, and excessive worrying could be very paralyzing. There's some individuals that will stay in bed for 3 days because of the anxiety. Another one is difficulty with carrying out day-to-day tasks. So while we may think, you know, just get a job, it's not that easy, because just getting up in the morning is a challenge for them. Feeling disconnected or numb. This is a very popular one that I find, especially with post-traumatic stress disorder. People will say, I don't feel anything. And I asked someone some time ago, when was the last time you felt anything? And they said it's been years. So people literally with post-traumatic disorder will disconnect from their body because they don't feel safe. So they don't feel anger, they don't feel hurt, they feel nothing, just completely numb. Suicidal ideations. And I really want to speak on this one because this is an easy one to judge. Oh, you have a lot to live for. And a lot of the times when somebody has these suicidal ideations, they're very passive. It's really more of a response to psychological pain. And essentially, when I asked them, I said, what makes suicide a good option for you? And they'll say, because the pain would stop. So growing up, I would hear, I'm not going to the funeral of somebody that committed suicide because God does not want that. That's, you know, they're breaking the commandments. And as I got older, you know, that it didn't make sense to me because all suicide is a way to end the pain. The person is in intense psychological pain. And I remember one day sitting across from somebody who was in such intense psychological pain that I felt like I could feel it. It was so palpable, just tears. And so when people are in that measure of pain, they really just want a way out. So we have another story. And this is a story of America and mental health and the evolution of mental health treatment in America. And it started with someone who experienced serious mental illness. So we're gonna talk a little bit about him because I think his story gives hope, right? So he is someone who transformed his personal struggles with mental illness into an entire movement to help other people. So essentially, he repurposed his pain. I want you to look at the second line, because sometimes I think that we may feel like serious mental illness or mental illness kind of discriminate. So it only is for a certain person. It's only for people that may have no home. It's not, it doesn't discriminate. He was a graduate of Yale College and he was a Wall Street financier. And he struggled with serious mental illness. But let's go down a little further. Somebody said trauma. That's the first response that I got when I said serious mental illness. He lost his brother. And so he lost his brother, and that led to him having his first bipolar disorder. Let's think about the cup, right? Maybe he had a lot of stuff going on. The cup, somebody was just pouring into that cup and it overflowed. And he had that. So he wanted to, again, get out of the pain. So you see how it's all tying together? I want to get out of this pain. I lost my brother. We don't know if it was a sudden death. Maybe it was because he was pretty young. But he attempted suicide by jumping out of a third-story window. So he wanted to end the pain. And after that, he had some hospital stays, and it was there that he decided he wanted to have some reform with mental health treatment because of how he was treated. He was placed in a straitjacket. He saw some really inhumane treatments. And even though he was struggling with bipolar disorder, which is a serious mental illness, he wanted to make the difference. And he did. And I love this quote, so I give it its own slide. Because as you read that, I also want you to apply it to your own life and those dark moments that you may go through when you feel like, I don't know how to get out of this. So it says, as I penetrated and conquered the mysteries of the dark side of my life, it no longer held any terror for me. I have decided to stand on my past and look the future in the face, right? And I love that. I have decided to stand on my past and look the future in the face. And this is somebody, again, who was struggling with serious mental illness. So when he got out of the hospital, he got together with 2 other men, and they started the National Committee for Mental Health Hygiene, which transformed over the years. And those are the goals there: to improve attitudes towards mental health conditions, to improve services for people suffering with them, and to work for the prevention of them. So it was prevention, it was like wraparound services, and they started an entire movement. And I want to mention one of the treatments that you hear about and you really can't believe, lobotomies that were performed on individuals with serious mental illness. And these were kept for the ones with severe psychiatric disorders. And that's where they actually cut out piece of the brain. And so some individuals reported improvements. It was very detrimental. And that, I think, was discontinued in the 1950s. So we're gonna transition into Lynn and I having a conversation in a little bit. But these are some of the risk factors for serious mental illness. So in many instances, sometimes we see the symptoms of the mental illness. We see somebody who may be flying off the handle really quickly. We see somebody who may not want to get out of bed. But these are some of the risk factors. And we have early adverse life experiences. And somebody mentioned ACEs. ACEs is a big one. So anytime that when I work with someone who, say I'm doing an intake, and almost 2 minutes into the intake, I already know that this person has been through severe trauma. Borderline personality disorder, that's one that I would say is a little controversial, but each individual who has shared with me that they were previously diagnosed with borderline personality disorder has suffered a very severe abandonment, and usually from a parent. And so what happens is they don't trust people, right? So we label them, but when you listen to their story, you're like, how were you even able to survive that? It is tied in with abuse, it's tied in with sometimes some people have said, my parent just left me, never came back. Put me into a children's home, a residential home, never came back. So when you talk about serious mental illness, you cannot talk about it without talking about those traumatic experiences. Substance use, few social connections, biological factors. Those are just some of them that set up the risk factors that can put an individual at risk for it. So I'm gonna sit now, and Lynn and I are gonna have a heart-to-heart conversation because I really want Lynn to share her story. Okay, and first of all, thank you again, Lynn, for coming to do this and for sharing your story. So right now on the screen, we have common challenges faced by those experiencing serious mental illness. So we have those up there, but can you share with us some of the challenges that you would have experienced?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would say all of them. It's hard. It's hard to deal with mental illness, especially for me. I don't want to start asking questions. Okay.
Okay, so we have suicide, we have poor quality of life. Is there anything else there that you would want to add to the list when you think about what you would have experienced?
It's all there.
Okay, thank you. And then we're gonna go to types of stigma. So we have public stigma and we have self-stigma. Public stigma, which we're all really familiar with. We want to talk about the self-stigma as well, just because so many individuals experience that, right? And I want Lynn to speak a little bit about that, the self-stigma, just how when you were labeled. So public stigma can lead to self-stigma, right? Somebody shared with me, you know, they were really hesitant to go to the hospital to receive psychiatric treatment. And then a family member later made a really disparaging comment about being crazy. And this individual since then really struggled with anxiety, fear that I'm gonna lose my mind, not feeling good enough, feeling very defective. So that's what self-stigma is, and self-stigma is very damaging. So when we, as the public, we make certain words, we're not careful with what we're saying or how we treat people, that can lead to that self-stigma. And when you're going along about your business, that individual is really struggling. And that's what I want Lynn to kind of speak about, just her experience with feeling stigmatized, or that self-stigma, how you see yourself, how you saw yourself.
When I don't know how to say it. I'm very nervous, guys. I'm sorry. All I know is stigma is not okay. People with mental illness get stigmatized all the time. And either it's work environment, family environment, social environment, even on Facebook. Facebook is the worst. I'll tell you that right now. If you have Facebook and people are being mean to you, don't even get out of it, because it's going to get worse. I'm experienced from that. Okay. There's a lot of stigma in like health fields. Anywhere you work, people should be open up to not seeing on the outside, but take time to know that person, get to know that person, give that person a chance. Because we all deal with mental illness. We all deal with some kind of struggle in our lives and stigma, and it's really hard. And the only thing that I can say for me personally, how I got through it, yes, I'm gonna say I did use drugs, but now I'm learning how to not do that and to just let it be and let it go. Because people don't understand, people don't know how they're talking to us because they learn how to talk like that towards people all their life. That's how they grew up talking, but it's not okay. And what about you guys? Do y'all have any stigmas in your life? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And I really appreciate Lynn doing this. I really have to say, this was very difficult for me. Thank you for support. Her story alone just says that, you know, even when we have certain feelings or we experience certain things, there's still hope and we can still push past that. So this, you may see Lynn sitting here, but this took a lot. And it's a lot of courage, but I really appreciate her sharing that. So we have the effects of stigma. You know what's interesting to me? If say, for example, I have a heart condition, when I meet you, I don't define myself as, well, I'm Tamara, I am, let's say, I am a heart attack, something like that. We don't do that. But we do that with mental illness, right? She's a schizophrenic. She is crazy. She is this, she's that. Very, very stigmatizing words. And in working with people and in working with the patients, It's interesting because sometimes people 50-something years later are still remembering words spoken to them. And I would say, do you remember that cut you got on your knee when you were 10 years old? No, I don't remember the pain of it. But I remember the pain of the words my dad said, or my mom said, or this person said. So when we speak certain things, we have to remember that our words have power. We can heal or we can tear somebody down. So I thank you, Lynn, for just adding that part. But here's some effects of self-stigma. So when we use our careless words, we go on about our way, this is what they deal with, right? Reduce hope, because I mean, nobody thinks I can make it, like, you know, I'm being labeled. Low self-esteem, because you're dealing with so many difficult words, you're being labeled. It can increase the symptomology. I just shared when somebody said those words to them, probably didn't give it a second thought, probably didn't really mean it, but this person couldn't sleep for days, right? Difficulty with social relationships, because why would I feel good enough to be in a relationship with somebody when I feel like society thinks I'm not good enough, right? I'm being told that. And of course, it makes it difficult for them to maintain treatment, because what's the point? I am crazy anyway, so why should I even get treated? So that's the far-reaching impact of our words. And this is just one that just speaks about the pain of stigma. We kind of talked about that a little bit. So we don't necessarily need to go into that, but this is just how they experience, the experience of those who experience that stigma, who are stigmatized by others. But the last one, I really want to talk about the belief that you'll never succeed at certain challenges or feelings of hopelessness. That for me was a big one. So reducing stigma, I really love this one. I asked someone, what are some of the things you would want to see? How would you want to get your voice out there as it relates to, you know, serious mental illness? What are some things you would want to do? And he said a barbecue in the summer for, you know, for people that have serious mental illness, so we can all just get together. He was like, I know it's fall right now, so we gotta wait, but that's the first thing that came to his mind. The Clubhouse, they have an amazing program that really, I went there for the first time a couple of years ago, and I love the environment. It's an open space, and I remember taking someone there, and that person felt like such a part, right? So those are things that we can do to reduce the stigma in our communities. Lynn, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so this is just what we can do on an individual level, and I'm just going to highlight, be mindful of the language we use and show compassion. That's why we started with compassion, because we want to do that, and also normalizing mental health treatment. That's a big one. When we have individuals in crisis, mental health crisis at the clinic, or whether when I was working at the Center for the Homeless, that's one of the big things in crisis management, normalizing it. Hey, it's okay. And we'll be right here with you, you know, it's okay. Sometimes we go through hard stuff. It's gonna be okay. Normalizing that kind of treatment is okay. And the myths of mental illness. So the myths of mental illness, there are many. I want one person to just tell me a myth, something that they always thought about mental illness. Don't be afraid. Anybody? Connie? Anything?
I think a common stigma is mental health is not real, but people are just spoiled or want extra attention.
I love that you said that, because that's true. Sometimes we feel like this person is just doing the absolute most, they want attention, and that is not real. And you know, for some people, just getting out of bed is a daily struggle. Do you know there's some people who probably get on average 2 hours sleep a night because of serious mental illness? And then they stress about the fact that they're not getting enough rest. And then that creates a cycle. And so by the time you see them in the morning and they seem a little frazzled, you have no idea what they would have just gone through. So it's very real. I'll just touch on 2, and then I'll ask Lynn. Lynn is gonna speak on the next one. People with mental health conditions are violent. I don't know why my eyes went to that one, but that's a big one for me that I really wanna address. And mental health issues can't affect me. At home in Barbados, we say today is me, but tomorrow is you, because we all have human experiences. That's the thing. So today, I may be having a human experience and struggling with my mental health, but somewhere down the road, you may too, or somebody that you love. They affect everyone. I'm gonna give Lynn an opportunity to speak.
Okay, well, here we go again about the myths. There's just I've seen a lot, and with the mental illness that I have, people with mental illness, I'm just gonna put it, everyone, I'm not gonna say people. When we are taught to a certain way, it hurts us or it triggers us. Even employees of the health field, even employees anywhere. And it's really hard for us to like discern if you're joking or if you're serious. And it's really hard because sometimes we hear it and then we're like, well, did I just feel that? Like you can feel the and when someone says something and you know it irks you, you can feel that you can like sense it. And that to me is a trigger. And bad things happen with most triggers in life with mental illnesses. So I'm just saying, we just gotta be kind to each other. We gotta help each other out. This world is becoming more and more bad. I'm just gonna be honest, it's becoming bad. I see so many people get made fun of, or I see so many people get turned down for jobs and housing, and I was there. I've been through all of this, and it hurts me to see everyone else going through the same thing because they're scared to say something. And when you're scared to say something about your mental illness, we gotta let people know. We gotta let people know, like, hey, don't talk to me like that. Let's be kind. I know it's hard. It's easier said than done. I struggle every day, but I try to put it in practice so I can help other people.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And just emphasizing be kind, and good transition to this slide. And we're coming to the end. And we're nearing the end. So, because we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So this individual, I came across this story, and the unfortunate thing is that there's so many like him who have been victimized. There's the myth, that's why my eyes first went to the myth that people with mental illness are violent. They actually are more victimized than they are. They actually are more prone to being victimized than they are to be violent. I'm not saying that they have not been violent cases that exist, but the studies and the research differs. So he was boiled to death. He was locked in a shower, 180 degrees, literally, and boiled to death. And a lot of the times the way we treat people, Lynn keeps going back to that because that's a big thing for her, is really based on the beliefs. What are the beliefs we have? How do we see people? How do we see people who may act a little differently to us? So violence and serious mental illness, now this is the truth. And I'm not gonna go into all of it because I have the slide here, so you can kind of look at it. But these are studies that were conducted, and it shows that individuals with serious mental illness actually comprise a small number of violent offenders. Believe it or not, that's those studies, those are facts. And so working at the Center for the Homeless, I said I've been doing this work over 30 years. When I say doing this work, working with this population, and a lot of them are beaten up. They're beaten up, they're burnt with cigarettes, you name it. All types of stuff happens to them. Sexual assault, battery, robbery, stabbings. And these are not things that we see in the media. What we see in the media is when something happens and they automatically assume, oh, must be mental illness. And then that's what's put out there. But the reality for those of us who work on the ground, that's not, we see the marks and we see that. I've sat with people who've been sexually assaulted with at the SVI unit, Special Victims Unit, SVU, right? So that's a reality. But I want to talk about the reality now. as we come to the end, this is what I've seen, right? And this is just a small number of what I've seen over the years, both in Barbados and both here. So the first one, and this is the reality of individuals with serious mental illness. Discharged to the streets after hospitalization due to having nowhere to go, and that could be even in the dead of winter. And for any of you who've ever had a surgery, or you've ever had, say you were in the hospital for suicidal ideations, imagine what it's like to come out and go to the streets. Imagine what that is like. But they have nowhere to go because in many instances, people with serious mental illness, they become disconnected from family, friends, just because of the symptomology. Frostbite and subsequent loss of body parts. So we see that a lot at the Center for the Homeless, right? Okay. We see that a lot at the Center for the Homeless. And then also being trafficked. That's something that's going on here in South Bend as well. Inability to provide for basic needs. So those are all things, multiple incarcerations, right? Released from jail and sometimes get arrested again in the same day. That's the reality of what we have seen, what I've seen over the years. And I know we have 2 minutes. So I'm just gonna wrap up with this one, which is a call to action. I'll put it on the screen, but I'm gonna let Lynn say what she thinks the community, how could the community support individuals with serious mental illness.
I'm using this microphone a lot. I just think that we should put, just have a mental health awareness. Getting a lot of people together, come here, do a, I don't know, just be like active with us. Like get together, do a picnic, a party or something like that, and to show like gratitude and show like you guys care and your concerns, and but be truthful with it and not fake it. Because we also can sense that too. And a lot of people don't like fake. And just be here for us. That's all I can say. Just sympathize with us and get to know us. That's what I'm sticking to.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you for having us as part of this presentation. And this last slide is just, I'm not going over it, but just pointing to that. These are some lessons and some things that I've learned from individuals with serious mental illness over the years. And it's really just a small number. I've learned a lot. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you. Questions. And with your questions, feel free to also give some words of support if you want to individuals here who may be struggling with serious mental illness or may just be having a hard time. So we're going to start right now.
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment how proud I am of you, Lynn. You did an amazing job.
I don't know if everyone heard, but I just wanted to repeat this. My name is Danielle. She's a chief residential officer at the Center for the Homeless and my former boss. And she just wanted to say how proud she was of Lynn because she knows Lynn too. So trust me, this is a really big deal for Lynn. So I'm proud of her too. Thank you.
I just walked in to check out a book and saw this going on and was invited in. I am so happy that I did. Because of the timeliness, we have a niece in Illinois who we just got word she has struggled all of her life with mental issues. Just got word that she went off of her medications. I don't know the details. Had such a downfall that her family couldn't control her, had to call in the police. And here's the message I want, a thought in regard to the police and how they have to deal. And so thankful are we, these policemen have had training and were able to address her need in the very best way possible. And I know that many of you know that that isn't always the case. And that, as a community, I think we need to address.
Thank you so much for your comment, and I just wanted to add to that, which is about working for the Center for the Homeless and also at Indiana Health Centers. We have had some really good experiences with law enforcement as well. So I really love that you highlighted that as it relates to dealing with individuals with serious mental illness in our community.
I have a few different things. My name is Beth Weber, and new to South Bend, lived here about 2 years. But I also have a family member recently that stopped taking her meds and was driving home to her parents. Fortunately, she has two parents, one that works at the call center and one a senior in law enforcement, and they pulled her over. And she went to, and there is a crisis response team here in South Bend, which I encourage you. You know, I know many in the audience can probably fill in on that, but that was started in the spring, so that law enforcement isn't always the best and first response, but they have a crisis response team both for adults and for children, and I think they've had close to 300 calls that have intervened. So get to know that program. Lynn, you were amazing. I don't know if anybody went to the Brian Stevenson presentation. He was in town, and one of the things he said is you need to be proximate, meaning that you need to lean in and hear people's stories. So I think you've given us our first step into leaning into a story, and I would invite all of us to go in and lean into another story. So thank you so much, Lynn. You're so brave, and thank you for sharing your story with us. You should be, I'm incredibly proud of you.
Anybody else has a question or comment? Okay, so thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, I'm sorry. Because of
okay, sorry. So I wanted to comment on the crisis team that is in South Bend. My mother struggles with mental illness as well, and I had called them prior to her actually having a full episode, because now she's currently sitting in jail. And I just feel like they didn't provide the right resources at the time when I've had already explained to them like her history, because they know her very well. And I just felt like the route that was taken for her was the wrong route, because she's not getting help sitting in jail.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Can I just make a comment on that? So thank you for your transparency and sharing that with us. We're really honored that you trusted us with that information. And I wish your mother much better. One of the things that some of the things we found that were helpful with individuals in crisis. Number one, when you contact the non-emergency 911, you can let them know this individual is having a mental health crisis. If the individual is willing to be hospitalized, that's a conversation I have with them. And then we won't stop there. I'll call the hospital and I will talk on their behalf. We have a patient en route, so this is XYZ. I'm building that relationship. When somebody's in a mental health crisis, they're not able to really give the information that they need to give to meet that criteria for hospitalization. So you have to be their voice in those instances, and then also keep following up. So that's something, and we've had 3 successful hospitalizations in the last couple of weeks, because you've got to like really walk them through that. You got to be their voice. Imagine like you're being their voice. And the other thing I'll say with law enforcement, and this is one of the things that I would have learned in teaching crisis and trauma, is that law enforcement by law have to protect the community by law. So they have that obligation. So guess what happens when somebody's in crisis and they may seem to be a danger to the community? Then they have to. So that's why it's important to kind of have that relationship, advocate for them. There are times we had to sit in the hospital and work with them. in order to get that hospitalization. Yes.
Thank you.
On my far right, we have Theresa Olson, the Executive Director of Clubhouse of St. Joe County, joined by Yusuf Torre, who is standing in as a proxy for Jennifer Weldy. Jennifer Weldy holds a master's in music from Bowling Green State University. She is a classically trained singer. She has been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder for over 13 years. She has been a member of Clubhouse of St. Joseph County since 2020. In her spare time, she likes to sing, read, knit, cook, and hang out with friends. Theresa Tess Olson serves as the Executive Director of Clubhouse of St. Joseph County, a psychosocial rehabilitative environment for individuals living with serious mental illness. Olson has served in the public and nonprofit sector for most of her career. Just prior to starting at Clubhouse of St. Joseph County, she served the Cook County Sheriff's Office in Chicago for 10 years in various executive capacities. Prior to joining the Sheriff's Office, Olson served the Chicago Children's Advocacy Center as the Chief External Affairs Officer, overseeing all marketing, PR, fundraising, and government relations. Olson holds a bachelor's degree in marketing communications from Columbia College of Chicago and multiple executive education certificates. She is also a graduate of the former Elkhart Memorial High School. Yusuf Torre, who is standing in as a proxy for Jennifer Weldy, is a Riley High School graduate, a member of Clubhouse, and a new kitty owner of Pinky. Second from the right is Mary Bales from Oaklawn Psychiatric Center. Mary completed her master's and Ph.D. in Human Development and Family Studies at Purdue University. Her postdoctoral studies and early career as a research professor were at the University of Notre Dame with a focus on human rights and dignity in an international context. Mary's work at Oaklawn Psychiatric Center began as a CAPRCI, providing direct support to individuals struggling with mental health and substance use in a low-barrier shelter. She now serves as the manager of housing development for Oaklawn and Elkhart and St. Joseph counties and oversees the PATH team, city outreach team, housing specialists, and coordinated entry leads for Regions 2 and 2A. She is most proud of her two children, Amelia and Jacob. Theresa Jongkind, MSW CRC, is a manager from Vocational Rehabilitation Region 1. Theresa has been with Vocational Rehabilitation for 15 years, starting as a counselor in the Elkhart office. In 2015, she transitioned to the South Bend office as area supervisor and became the Region 1 manager in August 2024. She obtained her MSW from IUSB in 2004 and is a certified rehabilitation counselor. Theresa is dedicated to helping those with barriers to employment access the services and receive the supports necessary to achieve their employment goals. All right, so Jennifer and Yusuf.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here today. It's really a pleasure and an honor. I just wanted to give a very brief introduction about Clubhouse of St. Joseph County and the Clubhouse model. There are over 300 clubhouses throughout the world. Many of them are very small in nature. Some of the ones internationally might just be available part-time and almost like a shack that is available to the individuals with serious mental illness in the community. Clubhouses are for adults with serious mental illness, and that is our primary focus. We've been open almost 9 years in November. The first clubhouse is Fountain House. It was founded in New York City in the 40s, in the early 40s, a group that were hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital started just forming a group and talking and sharing amongst themselves. They called themselves WANA, We Are Not Alone. And when they were released out of the hospital and Haldol and Thorazine were created, they stayed together. And they originally had met on the steps of the public library in New York and then stumbled upon a beautiful house with a fountain, i.e. Fountain House. So we're grateful for their origins. Clubhouses all operate on 37 standards that are very inclusionary. The members are elevated into a shared role with staff. We all work together to operate the Clubhouse community. Our founder of our Clubhouse is here today, so we're grateful to have Lisa Anderson with us. She's embarrassed to show. The Clubhouse is operating what is called a work order day. We tout bringing people out of isolation is one of the most important attributes and aspects of the Clubhouse model. Clubhouses are known to have our members experience immediately a reduction in isolation. And as most of you are probably aware, the Surgeon General released a report last year officially citing isolation and loneliness as deadly epidemics. We have known that within the seriously mentally ill community forever. So we help to reduce isolation. We bring people together in a safe and stigma-free zone to be able to socialize. I consider the socialization really the most important aspect of the Clubhouse model. However, the work order day is also very important because evidence-based model has proven that individuals find meaning and purpose when they are doing work. We also help to experience reductions in hospitalizations and in medical costs. The hospital costs for just 2 weeks are paralleled in an entire year of services that can be provided at Clubhouse. So it costs the same for 2 weeks in a hospital for a whole year of participation at Clubhouse. We also experience reductions in incarceration and in suicide. Our members are in a community that is safe and they're building relationships and they're really thriving. So Yusuf, who is with me here today very courageously, I'm grateful for his willingness to join us today. He's going to be reading on behalf of our member that was supposed to be with us, Jennifer Weldy. She is struggling, so she was not able to honor her commitment and be with us today. But one of the greatest things that I feel like Clubhouses bring to the individuals that are grateful or fortunate enough to be part of the community is that we support our members whether they're quote doing well or if they're not doing well. We try to avoid kind of deeming someone as doing well or not doing well. So when someone's struggling, we try to support them to the greatest of our abilities, and when they come back from their struggles, we're happy to see them and welcome them back. Jennifer has very eloquently written what we call the Clubhouse Manifesto, and Yusuf is going to read it for you.
Clubhouse is life-changing because it promotes the dignity and respect of human life through the opportunities for community, belonging, equity, and meaningful work. Research has shown the benefits of community and belonging. Equity is what enables people with disabilities to accomplish the task of living. However, at Clubhouse, the basics for achieving all these things is the work. Clubhouse has recognized that the work itself is what gives people dignity and not the income, prestige, power, or fame that can come from having a job or career. While these things can be nice, it is the work itself that is a truly meaningful part of what we do as humans. In most jobs, in most fields, the point of the work is service of others in some respect. At Clubhouse, we get to serve others who suffer in a similar way that we do, and in doing so, we serve ourselves. While all our stories are different, we have the shared experience of living with a serious mental illness, and the stigma that society holds towards this set of experience and its outward manifestations. I believe that the goal for most of us who lives with mental illness is recovery. Like success, recovery has many different versions as there are people who attain it. However, in a general sense, recovery from mental illness usually means the ability to live with a remission in symptoms, functioning to one greatest capacity, and living a healthy and meaningful life. Meaning and wholeness are achieved primarily through connection and community. Community is what fosters a sense of belonging, and there is no community without connection. However, I argue that having something to do with one's time is actually the primary concern. People tend to do something when they are gathered. They discuss, they joke, they argue, they eat, they cook, they clean, they make plans. This is basic family behavior, but it is also central to the work environment. Both family and the workplace are communities. At Clubhouse, we are co-workers, but we're also family. This aspect of Clubhouse is particularly important for our members who are elderly or isolated to the point that they have no childhood friends or family left. As Clubhouse family and colleagues, we participate in the life of a typical community, but our impact extend beyond our space to the greater community. This is accomplished not only by our very existence, but also by what we do together. And coincidentally, what we tend to do is to promote our very existence as a clubhouse. Much of our work order day is filled with operation-oriented tasks. These include tracking data regarding our impact as a clubhouse, reaching out to absent and inactive members, maintenance tasks, responding to emails, managing social media, expense reporting, and operating a cafe and a scratch kitchen that provides snacks and meals to member staff and visitors at a steeply reduced rate. These operation tasks are found in any business, but in Clubhouse, they are more meaningful because they are related to a cause that is close to the heart of every member. After all, who doesn't find self-preservation to be a worthy cause? However, beyond self-preservation, Clubhouse promotes shared experiences, human dignity, and the value of all lives, even our own. Often from political rhetoric and the way others tend to treat us in public, it seems that as though the greater society would prefer it if we don't exist. However, we are alive, and that is one of the paradoxes we must cope with, living as persons living with severe mental illness. We value our lives, at least most of us seem to most of the time. This brings us to suicide. Why does society seem to despise the severely ill, mentally ill, but not condone suicide? I believe that it is because of our shared human experience that we are driven to value life in the abstract. We agree that every human life should be treated with dignity, but the reality of it is that some lives are valued more than others by society. I believe that each person is destined to experience life filled with good experiences, regardless of their circumstances. I also believe that we live in a community so we can lift each other out of the painful depths of the human experience. Because of this, I believe that suicide reflects a moral deficiency, not in the person who died, but in the culture around them for failing to offer the support and appreciation that was due them as a human being and necessary for them to cope with whatever struggles are real, oppressive, and seemingly interminable enough to resort to the ultimate escape route. Life with a serious mental illness is very difficult and also painful. The symptoms alone cause severe anguish and are often lifelong. The isolation from and stigmatization by society on top of that is also hard to bear, especially if one is suffering alone. Due to the nature of our illnesses, we often find ourselves doing just that, even without taking stigmatization into account. When we connect with each other in the community of people with severe mental illness, we find a support and affirmation of our experience that we create as human beings. Not only that, but we work to promote a better world where we are included in society and our lives are celebrated as another valued facet of the human experience. Whether we give tours, sit at the reader's desk, wash dishes, take out the trash, or assist with attendance, we all play a part in promoting this vision of a better society. We take the confidence we gain in the space doing work out into our daily lives beyond Clubhouse. We form relationships in the community. We improve relationships with our families and friends. And we attend treatments, therapy, and support groups, activities which are not superfluous, but vital to managing the symptoms that left untreated would otherwise prevent us from doing such simple things as understanding a conversation, keeping our regular schedule, or getting out of bed. We participate in church services, clubs, and other community organizations. We volunteer at other places in the community. We serve as board members for nonprofit organizations. And yes, we even have jobs. Sometimes even jobs that enable us to be fully self-sufficient. I maintain that this would not be possible without doing the work of Clubhouse first, without learning to appreciate the value of our own existence and that of others who suffer like us and our fundamental rights to dignity and respect. This is why Clubhouse is deeply meaningful and life-changing to those of us who choose to participate.
Well, I'd like to first acknowledge what an honor it is to sit at the table with you, Yusuf. That was amazing, and I appreciate you sharing with the group. My name's Mary Bales. I'm manager of housing at Oaklawn. And just kind of Oaklawn is a community mental health center serving Elkhart and St. Joseph counties. And just to kind of like fundamentally set kind of what I'm going to talk about, which is our housing department. We can't separate housing from mental health. That's impossible to do. I'm so grateful and honored to work at an organization that acknowledges that puts resources into it, that allows people with me to put a lot of work into it. I started as a peer support professional at Motels for Now, the low barrier shelter here in South Bend. I struggled with substance use for a number of years. Was a survivor of domestic violence, and Oaklawn gave me a chance. And I've just been so grateful to be a part of this journey with housing. We've grown significantly in the last 4 to 5 years. And it's been great to be a part of it. But yeah, you just can't separate out the two when we're talking about mental health and housing. Without that stability, it's a much more challenging thing to be able to kind of work on the rest of the things in your life when you don't know where you're going to lay your head at night. I don't know how many of you in the audience have thought at the end of a hard day, I just want to go home. And so that's our goal at Oaklawn. One of our goals is to provide that for folks, to have them go home to a place. In the last couple of months especially, there have been folks that we've helped house. Oaklawn does not work as a silo. I should have said that initially. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, and housing is a community effort. So Oaklawn has its pieces, and I know I saw somebody from the city here. I see Motels for Now here. We are all working together to help house folks. The last couple of months, there have been some folks who we've helped house, and they've passed away in their homes. And those hit me really hard. You know, they got to that point where they have that bed to lay in, and, you know, the bathroom to use, and then a couple months later they passed away. Or, you know, a year into it, they passed away. And the thing I have to keep reminding myself is they had a home, and I'm so glad to be a part of that process. It's not, there's still grief involved, but I'm so grateful that they had a home when they passed away. So that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to go through some of our guiding principles, and then some of our different types of housing. Housing, it would be simple if it was like, here's a house, you can live in it. But every single program has different requirements and different funding sources and different documentation and deliverables. And so it is complicated, and I'm not going to try to complicate it. I'm just going to try to give an overview of kind of the different types of housing that would be available to our community members. And then I always have to say this, I get probably 15-ish calls every single week, somebody who's either unhoused or losing their housing. And I would love if every single time somebody called, I said, I have something for you. And that's just not the case. And we have a housing shortage, and with this community, we are working really hard to minimize that shortage, but that's our reality. We have to get really creative with how we can help people be safe first, and then hopefully along the way get permanent housing. So Oaklawn operates on Housing First principles. Housing First is this model, evidence-based, that the first thing somebody needs to kind of be able to move forward and grow and develop into a quality of life is that stable housing. So the housing comes first and those services come next. This is in contrast to what it was like for decades and decades, where it was more of the, okay, are you sober? Have you received treatment for your mental illness? Are you currently active in treatment? Then you deserve housing. Very much this is the approach of, you're alive, you're breathing, you deserve housing, period. And no, it's not perfect. I'm guessing that folks in the audience are aware of some of the difficulties with it, but that is our basic philosophy. Like, every single person deserves housing. The other kind of thing that we want to make sure we don't get in the habit of, which is tough when you have a housing shortage, is saying, hey, you need housing, here's this opening over on LaSalle Street, you need to move in there. Instead, it's trying to give choices when we can. So we have case conferencing, where there might be multiple different types of openings, and doing our best to give as many choices to the person or the household as possible. And unfortunately, sometimes it's like, here's an opening, would you like it or no? And that stinks. And I hope 10 years from now, we're in the same room and we're having different conversations about the options. But really, it's not jamming individuals into openings. It's trying to figure out what works for them. And with that is that agency and self-determination. We have some housing specialists that most recently, some of you might know Chuck Stoner, he showed somebody 11 different units before they found one. And they're moving in on Monday, and we're all so happy that he found one that's going to work. So that's what it's about. It's a lot of work to figure out what's going to work for the individual. There's sometimes trauma associated with different areas in South Bend, and that could be a reason why got to avoid the south side. So now we have 3 different areas we can look at. But all of this is just to say that it's really about the person and what they need and what's going to help them kind of move forward in their life with that stability. So I'm going to go through some of our different kinds of housing. All of these different housing types are trying to fill a gap. So not one of them would be the answer on its own. Some of them are more structured, some of them are less structured, some of them are low barrier, others are higher barrier to entry. But I'm going to start with kind of one of our higher barrier to entry. It's supervised group living. It is a community setting. So not only do we have to think about the individual and how they're doing, but how are they going to do living in the same, sharing the same kitchen, sharing the same living space with, up to like 10 other people. And so we have to think through those things with this. Generally, these referrals will come from state hospitals. Many of you know, there's not as many folks in state hospital as were once there. So we get a lot of state hospital referrals, internal referrals. And then we have one exception that's called Turnock Housing in South Bend. And that is for folks who are experiencing literal homelessness. And again, it's community living. So those barriers to entry are higher. It is a little bit more of that treatment first versus housing first approach, but definitely trying to give opportunities for folks to move into that. All of these are voluntary also, I should have said that. The next kind of housing, these are only over in Elkhart County, but we have had people from South Bend move over to Elkhart. Transitional residential settings. So those are a lot less structured, but we do ask that at some point, soon after moving, that they engage in services. This is again like community living, so we have to kind of think through what the effect maybe some untreated symptoms would have on the folks already living there. And again, these are typically internal referrals. They're not always. We have a PATH team in St. Joseph County and in Elkhart County, and so a lot of those referrals will come from them. PATH is the team that does outreach to people experiencing homelessness. And so it's like a step down. So it's not totally housing first, because once you're there, we really want you to engage in services, but you can be there for a little bit before we're like, okay, now are you ready to engage in services? The third type we call supportive housing. It's section 811. So this is funded through HUD, like East Bank Village in South Bend is one of these section 811 housing. So it's for individuals with disabilities and very low income. And for ours, it provides like the rental assistance. So we have a few of them here, a few of them in Elkhart County. And then we also have like these additional voucher programs that sometimes come through. They're hit and miss. So these are all kind of like, they're filling in the gap in that you don't have to be engaged in services. It typically works out better if you are, because then you have somebody that's going to work with you to have any property manager, tenant disputes. You have someone that's already working with you, but that's another kind that we have. I'm trying not to rush because this is what I think the answer is to so many things, is permanent supportive housing. It is definitely what makes the most sense to me when we're thinking about human rights and dignity, housing being a basic human right. Permanent supportive housing is very low barrier to entry. It's a little bit of a complicated system, but in 2018, anyone who received this kind of funding has to do a coordinated entry process. The goal is to make it easier for folks to actually gain access to this kind of housing. And so that process, if folks are interested, please just reach out. I probably could talk for 30 minutes just about that. And this is based solely on housing first principles. So folks might have active substance use, they may have serious mental illness that's treated or untreated. But the goal again is to take those folks from coordinated entry who are the most vulnerable. And in Indiana, not just Indiana, the United States, the way we define vulnerability is who's most likely to die if they remain in their current housing situation. So folks who are literally experiencing homelessness with either mental illness, substance use, a combination of a lot of different things. And we try to get them housed as quickly as possible. After that, we wrap those services around them. Again, all of this is like the permanent supportive housing is voluntary. I don't have the chart with me, but the funding that's coming down from HUD and then our state IHCDA is really focused on this kind of housing. We're grateful to partner with some developers in South Bend Heritage, and then La Casa over in Elkhart County that's really committed to this work. But these continue to grow. You'll see more and more of these this kind of housing coming up. Then, so the supportive services, I'm not gonna, again, go through all of them, trying to be aware of my time too. Our outreach, so Oaklawn has a housing department. It's kind of split up into two, but we work really closely together. So we have our outreach teams, and then we also have our support services team that once folks are housed, that's the team that they would go to. Our outreach teams would go into the community, they get people on coordinated entry, they talk about these different housing options and work with them to figure out what works. And then once they're housed, they kind of be warm handoff to some of our housing support services staff. And we have, everybody has a range of services. The treatment plans are individualized, person-centered, and then I already said this kind of at the beginning, so much of this work is based on how we can connect folks to community resources. So I know it's already been said, but that connection and that community is such a huge part of stability and mental wellness that that's a big part of what we do. And I think South Bend especially has an amazing way to connect people to the resources. There's so many resources. We have a homeless coordinator in South Bend now, which is just not common across the state. And that's been really helpful to make sure that we're not all kind of operating in these silos, because that's pretty easy for organizations to do. Like, this is what we do, this is what this organization does, and until we can start sharing those resources, it makes a lot more work for each individual organization. So been really grateful to be a part of these programs. The one thing that I would definitely want to emphasize, as you hear more more permanent supportive housing that might be coming to our community, there are some people that are definitely going to disagree with it and say, you know, that person just needs to get a job or stop using drugs, and that, you know, take your med, like all of these negative kind of stigma, like they come up. Have those hard conversations with folks. You know, none of us are very far from knowing someone or being that person who struggles with substance use or mental illness. Like, none of us are. Up until, I'm doing that 7 years ago, my parents were like, none of my children would ever struggle with anything like that. And then I did. And so none of us are far from it. So have those hard conversations. If you can be a voice, I know sometimes it's scary to stand up to some of those conversations, but you know, help people to think a little bit differently about human dignity and rights, and that we're all humans and we're all here on the same earth, just trying to get by and support each other. And so I just would encourage you to have some of those conversations. The 3 words I'm gonna leave you with for housing in general, services in general, are patience, persistence, and presence. So sometimes housing is not a quick fix. Working with somebody who has serious mental illness or substance use, it's not gonna happen overnight. So just being that person for them, being patient, being persistent but not pushy, and then just being present. A lot of folks maybe don't have somebody that they can go to, and so the more of us that can be that person for somebody, across all of this, I think we're all going to be in a better place. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Theresa Jongkind, and I am the area, I was the area supervisor, now I am the region manager of VR Region 1. I have a lot of slides that I'm not really going to review, most of them. So I'm going to get right to the heart of it. I'm sorry, thank you. So just kind of giving you a bit of information is that VR is a state agency that helps people with barriers to employment obtain, maintain, retain employment. It's very individualized, very person-centered, using some of the services that are sitting here at our table. We are an eligibility program, meaning that you have to meet a certain criteria to be eligible for services. I will hit that here in a minute. Like I said, I don't want to hit all of these slides because it's very much all of the ins and outs of VR that really aren't relevant to the time that I want to make sure I have a lot. Sorry. So, anybody can be referred to vocational rehabilitation. Many people are self-referred, they're referred by a physical doctor, mental health therapist, parent, teacher, professor at college, and so forth. We, when somebody calls in or they do an online referral, they are given an appointment time, and then they come in and tell their intake counselor all about those barriers that they've had in terms of employment. They also talk about any barriers that they've had with their academics, maybe high school, college, so forth, and maybe interpersonal as well. What is standing in their way from being successful in an employment setting? Once that person is, we make an assumption at VR that everybody who applies for services is eligible for services. We're definitely not an agency who says, no, we are definitely an agency who says yes when we have that option to say yes, which is one of the reasons why I've been with Voc Rehab for so long. I really like giving everybody everything possible to them. Once they're determined eligible, then we start really talking about service identification and then implementation. So what is it going to take for somebody to be successful at work? What type of work are they interested in? We're not the agency who also says, hey, McDonald's is hiring, let's all walk down to McDonald's and apply. McDonald's is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. However, not everybody should be working at McDonald's, right? You don't want me working at McDonald's. So it's really talking about what kind of tasks are you comfortable with? What type of work environment are you interested in? For some people, they're very comfortable working at Walmart. I'll use that as an example. We have folks who will come in and say, I want to be a cashier. Being a cashier at Walmart versus being a cashier at CVS, totally different, right? Different work environments. Those types of things are important to understand so that we know where that person is going to be successful or not going to be successful. And a lot of that is really based on past history and that, and sometimes just anxiety of not knowing what a work environment is going to be like. But also it's sometimes because people aren't aware of what options are, and we really want to spend that time helping people identify options. I said bypass some of these. Person who developed our slideshow did a lot of slides. One of the criteria for Voc Rehab is that the individual has to have a substantial impediment to employment, meaning that that barrier is significant, that without Voc Rehab intervention that they would not be successful at work. And then one of the other things I think is really important based on what we do is looking at what we call functional limitations. So it's not about necessarily what the diagnosis that the individual has, it's more about how does that diagnosis impact their ability to be successful. And the areas that we look at are mobility, communication, self-care, self-direction, interpersonal skills, work tolerance, work skills. And so as an example, with somebody with autism, they may just have autism, and I don't mean only autism, but they may have autism, which could impact them in all 7 areas. But then they could have autism, anxiety, and a learning disability. For another individual who has been diagnosed with those, that may only impact them in 3 of those functional limitations. So it's really looking at that individual, which is very important. What I really want to get to are the services that Voc Rehab provides to individuals. So we're going to get there. I do want to be mindful of time. Okay. Once somebody is determined eligible and they meet with their caseload counselor, it's really spending time again talking about what do you like, what don't you like, what are your interests? And it's really thinking about anything. We don't want people to think, oh, I can only be a cashier at Walmart. Again, that's wonderful. But if you don't want to do that, what do you really want and why? And so it's having those conversations, doing assessments, and doing things that are like, yeah, we can support that. Let's investigate that. Or maybe that's not quite the best fit, but what do we take from that information and then kind of move it over elsewhere to make a better fit for somebody. A lot of that falls under that vocational counseling and guidance piece, and we really spend a lot of time with that. And it does take time because we find that if we spend that time on the front end, having those conversations and identifying the right services, folks are going to be more successful at the end. Okay. The primary piece, obviously, for Voc Rehab is finding work, but it's not always as easy as going out and finding work. It's also, okay, if you want to be an accountant, what is required to be an accountant? That could be going to college. Maybe you already have that college education, so do we need to, go further, maybe get a certification on top of that, whatever that is. So it's working toward those services. So we can help with post-secondary education as well, and then helping find work after. Or maybe you want to work now, do a part-time job at Subway. It's usually an example while you're going to college. So you can have that flexibility of working and working around class time, sorry. We also look at assistive technology. Does somebody require help with physical therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy, mental health therapy? While Voc Rehab is not an insurance company and will not be able to pay for all of that if somebody is not connected with services. Maybe we can help with that short term while they can actually maybe get find another funding source for ongoing therapies. So that's really good. Looking for a specific slide. All right, here we are. Okay, so this is employment services, and I know it's a little bit hard to read, it's a little small. One of the services that we offer is called discovery services, and that is what it is. It's really trying to help folks discover what their options are. What do they like? What do they don't like? Because, like I said earlier, people aren't always aware of their options. So part of what we want to help with is really giving you your options, right? So that you can really make a decision on what type of work best meets your needs. So as part of discovery, that can be going out and doing job shadows, watching that person at Martin's putting cereal on a shelf, right? Or then maybe it's actually doing this situational assessment where you've actually watched that person put the cereal on the shelf, but you want to know if you have the physical ability to actually put it on the shelf, right? And it might be informational interviewing, meaning talking to the accountant. How did you become an accountant? What do you like about being an accountant? How much money do you make? All of that, to kind of get a better idea of what's out there. And again, identifying options. Once we identify the options and what somebody has said, yes, I want ABC, then we actually physically go out and find it. What are the options in the area? Who are the employers that are hiring right now that offer that? And hope that we find it. And usually we find it. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it takes a while.
but ultimately we hope to find it. Supported employment is pretty unique to voc rehab and one of the primary services that we provide, and that is job coaching once somebody has work. And that's actually going in and being a support to that individual as well as being a support to that employer, saying we're going to help the employer show that person and teach that person how to do their job so that they have all the skills and support available to them. We also then support that employer by saying, you know, you might interact with that individual this way, but with this individual, you may need to interact with them in a different way. Here's the best way. Maybe it's being aware that maybe somebody takes medication at 8 a.m. and so at 10 a.m. maybe they're a little tired and it might take a minute to kind of get them back. Or really having conversations about accommodations as well. Maybe somebody needs to take every other Wednesday off at 1 for a doctor's appointment. So how do we work through that as well? Eventually hoping that that person will meet that maximum level of independence at work and we're no longer providing support. They are totally on their own. For some people, again, it happens very quickly, and for others, it takes a while, but we are there to support them on that. And then ultimately, we're done with, I mean, everybody's working, everybody's happy as you can be working, right? And then, and if they ever require support, they come back to us. So that's really it about voc rehab. Again, just putting it kind of in a nutshell. We do help people with all types of barriers to employment. So mental health is probably right up there with the, if I were to look at a percentage of the voc rehab people that we're serving right now in St. Joe County, I would say well over half are folks with serious mental illness. They may be successful at work and then something happens and they might take a step back to really focus on their health. And so maybe they have an employer that hasn't been as receptive to that. So they have to step back and then we help them find something else. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. And now we'll open it up to questions. If there's any questions in the audience? Yes.
We work with people that are in reentry. So how does having a criminal history affect being a part of your programs?
And I'm just going to repeat the question. So how does having a criminal history affect being part of your programs?
For Clubhouse, it doesn't really affect it. It is a question that we ask on our referral form, which is our process for membership. Generally, we encourage someone to come in and have a tour, and then we have a referral form that needs to be completed by a medical professional that's most familiar with their diagnosis. But we welcome individuals that are returning to society from incarceration, and we generally just operate on a policy of once a member, always a member, unless there's some security or safety issue that would preclude them from being able to stay as a member, but it's not an issue.
So generally speaking, with the housing part of Oaklawn, it doesn't have an issue, or it doesn't cause an issue. The only two automatic disqualifiers for the permanent supportive housing that I was talking about are if they are subjected to the lifetime sex offender registry, or if they've been convicted of manufacturing methamphetamine in federally assisted programs. So those are the two automatic disqualifiers for a lot of these housing programs. But generally, it doesn't.
In terms of eligibility for vocational rehabilitation, it doesn't impact at all. Not at all.
where we find that it is an impact is when we're actually trying to find somebody employment. So it's based on what the employer, what their expectations are, limits are.
Well, I do have another question. Can wait, just move to the microphone. Oh, I forgot about that.
Okay, now I'm ready. Can I, as a social worker working for Goodwill, contact you directly? I mean, do the referral directly? So I could do that for both rehab, right? And then for housing especially, do people just come up through Oaklawn, like you come in and you get diagnosed and then you get referred to other programs within Oaklawn? Or would there ever be an opportunity for somebody that we end up working with, helping them be able to find housing?
Yeah, so generally a lot of the folks in the 3 types of housing, supportive, supervised group living, transitional, and supportive housing, generally they are Oaklawn referrals.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be that way. For the permanent supportive housing, that is open to the entire community. It would just be connecting with somebody who could do an assessment with them.
Okay.
And so I guess it's almost a non-answer because it depends. But if you would have somebody, do feel free to reach out directly to me. And if they're unhoused, I might send you one way. If they're housed or unstably housed. So yeah, it's every single one of these comes up as like, let's just call and let's talk about this specific example.
That's good to hear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So as you all may know, one of the main goals of MHAM is to reduce stigma associated with mental health care. How does stigma affect people's ability to access your services?
From a Clubhouse perspective, I think that stigma impacts it probably more than we're even aware. When we encourage people to come for a tour, you know, sometimes they might see a bunch of people that are like them, which might bring comfort to some people, but might, you know, that self-stigma that you were talking about before might exist even more for them in the environment. So I personally feel like in the area of serious mental illness in particular, stigma is probably the first or among the very highest of the issues that keeps us all from living our best lives. And so I think that it doesn't impact once someone's in the community for sure. We actually created a project called the Empathy Project to try to have people individually share their stories that are among our members with the other members to try to diffuse any stigma that may occur, any sort of, you know, preconceived thoughts that people might have about somebody in the community. So it's one of the things that I feel we're most proud of at Clubhouse is that we are a stigma-free zone. So once you get there, you get free of it.
So just a couple of answers. What she said, but also I think one of the ways that Oaklawn also has done a good job with this is have peer support professionals being a really big and growing part of our organization. Those are folks with lived experience, either with substance use or mental illness, or being unhoused. And so celebrating the lived experience is one way that we are, I think, doing a phenomenal job with like kind of reducing that stigma. But then on the other side of things with actually just housing, I think that the stigma can interfere with building new housing, building low barrier shelters. People that are maybe unhoused, they still see the posts on Facebook about why this shelter shouldn't be built, why this permanent supportive housing shouldn't be built. And so we're humans, we have feelings, and I think that that can be really harmful. So again, kind of going back to encouraging folks to speak up and being a voice for folks when they might be feeling a lot of shame with with some of the comments they see or the attitudes they get from folks.
There's a lot of stigma working with anybody with a disability. So I think there's a preconceived notion of what somebody thinks somebody with a disability is, right? So it's trying to get away from that, and it's hard because there's just that perception. I think where I personally struggle and have to be more patient and mindful is when we're interacting with employers, and most employers are very open-minded, and I don't want to say that they're not, but then you get others who will say we don't hire people with disabilities, and I have to control myself and my face, but to say you probably have already hired people with disabilities and you just don't know it, and it's a personal struggle for me. But it's really trying to reduce that and really trying to normalize it, I guess, to use that word, without minimizing either. To really say, you know, this person can really benefit from employment. You can benefit from them working for you. How do we make that work? Because you'll probably find they're gonna be your best employee because they're so happy to be here.
I'd just like to thank the panelists again for coming out. And, oh, we have another question? My bad.
Yes, this week I have been watching a video with a doctor, and he's been asking the question, why do doctors, and it goes on. The summary of the video, I would put it this way. He was saying that we watch people at the top of the hill and say nothing, but then we bring the ambulance at the bottom of the hill to do whatever we believe should be done. The point that it keeps coming true to me, he said basically healthcare, and this includes mental health care, has to change. Now, the question I'm asking here, I'm not certain how you can respond to this, but applying that same concept that he was putting out there, the gravity of mental and all of the factors in it, the gravity of it, it is so serious that one, I have to commend the work that is being done by everybody. It's vital. We do need the ambulance at the bottom of the hill. But my particular thing is, how much of this can be prevented? Now, I know because you're at the ambulance at the bottom of the hill, you cannot be on the top of the hill. But I listened to the presentation, and clearly the principles that are required to deal with mental health issues are the same principles that are required to prevent them. That is acceptance. People won't be accepted. Then there's some other things you're just talking about, stigma and whatever else, and getting rid of that, which means people need to have a good self-understanding and good whatever else, so they don't end up in a situation where they're being stigmatized. There are some other principles that came up too, but all of what's going on here, how much of this could be, let's say, used as preventative education in a public forum? Is good to have this forum, okay? But it would be good if some of this could be out there in the media in terms of preventing persons from going down the hill and then keep the ambulance at the bottom of the hill. That's I don't know who could respond to that.
I'm actually happy to feel that. Our founder that I pointed out is here. We have this conversation quite a bit, that one of the things that Clubhouse, I believe, fulfills the best is that there are a lot of different entities, thankfully, that are dedicated to crisis as it relates to serious mental illness. And the Clubhouse model in particular, I feel like it fulfills the, okay, what do you do in the meantime? You know, what do you do when there's not a crisis, and how do you keep yourself from avoiding a crisis? So individuals that come to Clubhouse on a regular basis and engage in activities and participate there, it's been proven studies that they are less likely to engage in need for hospitalization and need for crisis services merely because they are coming and participating in this model. There's so little space in our community, in our societies, for individuals with serious mental illness, that merely having space where people can be authentic and be themselves is preventative in itself.
And I just read off your panel by saying, that's how we saw this whole panel. I'm sorry. That when we were planning, this panel is about prevention. It is about community, work, a safe place to live. And so I see this panel as the uphill panel, because we really do we know that there are ways that people can have stability in their life. And all of you represent that. So thank you so much for being here today.
My name is Jan Mirabal, and I'm the Education and Event Coordinator for Mental Health Awareness of Michiana. I am excited to welcome our presenters on today. These three organizations who are innovating to meet the mental health needs of community members with serious mental illness. We will hear from each of them about their programs, and we will reserve, as we've done before, all the questions until all three of them have shared. We welcome first Ms. Janet Nichols, MS PPMC from Bowen Health. Janice serves as a Regional Director with Bowen Health Region 2. Janice holds a Master of Science in Management and Leadership from Western Governors University and a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice and African American Studies with a minor in Sociology from Indiana University. Janice actively contributes to various organizations and boards, including the IU Groups Alumni Association Board, the IN 211 Advisory Committee, and the Advisory Board for the Women in Leadership Certificate Program at Valparaiso University. As an ordained minister, member of Junior League of South Bend, and Zeta Phi Beta sorority, Janice remains deeply involved in her community and is dedicated to making a positive impact in the lives of others. She excels in providing support and guidance to others, both in her professional career and community service activities. We welcome Janice Nichols. Next, we have Dr. Sheila McCarthy, Ph.D. from Motels for Now. Sheila is Executive Director at New Day Intake Center and Director of Motels for Now. Dr. Sheila McCarthy's academic work is on trauma healing, which she puts into daily practice at Motels for Now, the low barrier housing program that is ending chronic homelessness in St. Joe County. Formed through the practice of the works of mercy, Motels for Now offers accompaniment into permanent housing while providing for shelter, food, and medical care for 120 people at a time. Dr. McCarthy also teaches incarcerated undergraduates in the Moreau College Initiative at Westville Correction Facility. We welcome Dr. Sheila McCarthy. Then we have Mr. Henry T. Mudari from the St. Joe County Police Department. Henry is the crisis coordinator with St. Joe County Police Department Crisis Service Unit, as well as an adjunct professor at Indiana University South Bend, instructing in the School of Social Work. Henry is a native of Zimbabwe, citizen of Canada, citizen of the United States, and a resident of St. Joe County. His education is in political science, Toronto, Canada, and social work, IU South Bend. Henry is a regular contributor to the opinion section of the South Bend Tribune. He is a family man with a wife and 3 kids. His favorite saying, "I am who I am because of where I've been." Thank you all for being here today. Janice, would you like to get us started?
Good afternoon, everyone. One thing I would like to say, Bowen Health is actually formerly known as Bowen Center. For those that might be wondering, what is that? As of October 1st, we did go through a rebranding and name change. Bowen has a range of services like primary health, psychological services, addiction recovery, therapy, autism, inpatient hospital, transitional living, and skills services. What I'm going to talk about today is our skills training because it is our most intensive offering that we provide. Depending on the patient's level of need, one of our staff can work with someone between 6 to 9 hours per week. Our skills training services start at age 3 and covers our youth, adults, and also our elder care. So we don't, I know a lot of times you hear about our work that we do in the school, but we are a community-based service that does not just school, but adults as well. Some of the things that our staff will work with: bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, or depression, anxiety, social anxiety, things of those natures. Our staff use evidence-based practices like CBT, DBT, CALM, CARE, our voice, sound skills, and motivational interviewing to assist someone just have better living skills. So if they need help managing financing and budgeting, we do a lot of that on the adult side. Independent living skills, communication skills. We help parents with positive parenting skills when we are working with one of their youth. Any type of anger management skills, we provide those type of services, and also coping with trauma. So the goal is to help them. They come in for services and they set a goal of what their specific need is, and we work with them intensely on that goal and provide that service. One of the things that I like about the program and what we do as a community-based skill service is that we remove the barrier of transportation and also the stigma. A lot of people don't like to go into a physical location because they don't want to get talked about, and we've heard that even being discussed earlier today. So we can take that stigma away from them, and by helping them in their home, we go out in the community, anywhere where they're feeling comfortable, where we can provide that service for them, and that helps. We do not have a physical location in St. Joe County. Right now, we do have an office, like a drop-in location for our staff, so we can have instead of carrying a lot of stuff in my trunk, I have a place to leave it. But just different things that I've even seen staff come in and use the space with the patient and provide their skills services there. Working on getting a physical location here at some time in the future. I'm looking forward to sharing that news when it does come. For our skills, even though it is an intense service, we do believe in wrapping our patients with other services. So when someone is in receiving the skills services, they are often referred also for therapy services, any type of psychological service. And because we don't have a physical location here, we partner with our community partners to make sure that they're getting those services. So sometimes we have patients, they don't mind driving to our nearest location in Plymouth to receive their therapy services. Sometimes they'll take a virtual option, and still people are always comfortable with that. They want to see someone locally, so we'll partner with someone like Oaklawn to provide them with service, or the pro bono network that we have locally. So we try to find whatever resources that they need in the community and partner with that and refer them to those things and walk our patients through that, just so, because we're not going to always be in their life, and they're going to need to know how to navigate systems on their own. So those are things that we work on for them. Once someone is referred to our program, they will go through an intake process with a licensed therapist. And it's typically about 60 minutes. And then the therapist will refer out for that skills training services. Some patients come to us where they're not particularly ready for skills yet, but they will work with a therapist, and then that therapist will refer them to us after some time. And then we will work with that clinician to make sure that those goals that the clinician has for them, those things are working for them. And just again, to wrap that service around them so that we are helping to meet their needs. One drawback, just one of the things that was asked, some of the, what do we feel like is missing, or it's a drawback for that, for the program that we provide, that it is a Medicaid rehabilitation option program. And the way that you would qualify for that is by having an MRO-related diagnosis. So that means you have to have Medicaid in order to get it. And the way that I watch staff and how they're working with patients, I'm like, this needs to be something that is offered for everyone, no matter what type of insurance that they have. And unfortunately, that's not the case with our insurance services. So another thing that we've been able to do is we call it a student assistance program. So in the schools, like if you have a grant or anything that we call a large pot of money, that they are able to refer students to us no matter what type of insurance that they have, and we do a drawdown from that and provide the service that way so that people are covered. So the same like with an organization, if there's a grant, I talk to people about this all the time. If you have a grant, and you can have a pot of money set aside so that we can come in and provide that service as well. And we just triage, decide, who are we going to use it for? Because you want to give who has the most need to our services. And finally, I'd like to just leave you just with a story. I like to get stories of what we call stories of hope from our staff. I know they're doing great work in the community, and just to know how well this service is working for others. And we had a patient that their mother had passed away, and they were separated from their father, who unfortunately had sexually assaulted their sibling. And so this child was in foster care, and it was a traumatic experience. And the things that they were going through were their anger and anxiety, that they needed somebody there for them. And I had a staff member that could be there for them. And as they're walking along with this patient, it didn't start off well. They had some rocky moments, of course, because there's a lack of trust that this child had, and we had to rebuild that for them. And as time progressed, games that they would do to help the child talk about their feelings and things that they're going through. There would be a game. They learned how to lose the game without getting mad and walking away from the game. And then it came down to, we learned that this child was also being sexually assaulted by their father. And before she was working with our staff, she didn't have anyone that she could express that to. So those are just some of that's just one aspect of what I see my staff doing working with this program. Thank you.
Thanks to Mental Health Awareness of Michiana for putting this on today. This is really a unique gathering to get to talk with one another about serious mental illness, which is, you wouldn't be in this room if it hadn't touched you deeply. The mic stopped picking her up. Thank you, right. You wouldn't be in this room if serious mental illness hadn't touched you deeply and affected your family members and perhaps yourself. So we all here have a story of someone we care deeply about in their experience with serious mental illness. I didn't know I had an aunt with schizophrenia until I think high school or college is when my grandparents shared that with me. We always knew Aunt Mary was a little bit different, but couldn't quite put the words on it. But she would call my father every day to talk with him, and he was a gentle support and presence in her life. And sometimes she would say, "Are you mad at me?" And he'd always say, "Oh no, no, Mary." And just so made me think of what Lynn said so well. We have to be kind to one another. And we all need someone in our life that will just be unfailingly supportive, the way that my father is still to my Aunt Mary, whose 70th birthday is this weekend. Schizophrenia shortens one's life significantly, so all the more amazing. That she hasn't experienced homelessness and has a lot of great support in her life. But knowing that we're not alone, that there's people that care about us, that are kind, is really what's most essential. Growing up near Boston, I would see people sleeping outside on grates in heating, trying to warm themselves, and just felt like that was completely wrong. This shouldn't exist in society. Which got me interested in issues of homelessness, and eventually led me to the Catholic worker movement in college, where I spent many years in Los Angeles and Skid Row and New York City, and then back at South Bend while studying at Notre Dame. And the Catholic worker in South Bend runs Our Lady of the Road, a free laundromat cafe on Main Street. We'd serve breakfast, provide showers and laundry, but housing someone never seemed a possibility until the pandemic was recognized as a public health crisis, and homelessness became seen as a public health crisis. So we were able to house 80 people at first, and then up to 120 in a single motel on Lincoln Way West near the airport, where we continue to operate as we have plans to build a new facility. So we've had 770 guests during that time, and have ended homelessness for 500 of them. It really comes down to this idea that Lynn brought up, that starts with kindness, of seeing into someone's situation, that they're in a moment of deep crisis and homelessness. They're likely experiencing all of the things that Tamara put on the board there. This poor quality of life that likely had abuse and trauma in it early on, that led to a disability that was never caught. So many of our guests are too disabled to be on disability because the process is so complicated and long and requires an advocate and patience to get through it. And then unemployment isn't an option given their circumstances, and to kind of guide them into vocational rehab. And then so much of a substance use disorder is a part of it. And then homelessness and incarceration is really where we see so many of our guests in that trifecta. And the last part of her list was suicide, which is an early death is really so much a part of homelessness. It shortens one's lifespan by 20 years. Mary mentioned, Dr. Bales mentioned, that it is a common thing when people are housed finally, that their life expectancy is not long. It wasn't long on the street, continues to not be long when they're housed. We've had 51 of our guests pass away in these 4 years, 17 of whom were housed. so not a majority, but that it's a very sobering thing that when we got into this, and I saw the statistics that it could be up to 12, even 15% people passing away within a 5-year period nationally. So just sort of braced myself for that. And, to love people knowing that they're in their last days, their last years perhaps, is very powerful to get to accompany people through that. So it's at Our Lady of the Road that we sign people up for our wait list at Motels for now, which is unfortunately a very long wait, about 12 months now for men and 6 to 9 months for women. So whether amnesty is the best option in the winter for them, and then otherwise it's really outdoor camping in the summer until they're able to get in with us. Hopefully that will move along. It was less of a wait last year. The Housing Authority had emergency housing vouchers and some housing choice vouchers, neither of which they have now. But the Housing Authority is now has fixed up enough of their public housing that some of that has become available. We've brought 31 people in the last 3 weeks to the Housing Authority for meetings that they may get into public housing. So that's incredible. The first of whom goes to sign his lease on Monday. So when people are at the motel, we provide all of these supports. People often confuse low barrier with low intensity services, and in fact, it's the opposite. That we have the highest level of involvement in people's lives. This isn't self-management just because people's involvement is optional, but really it's completely intensive. That we have 24/7 staffing and support of people that are or know each person's name, make sure they greet them by name every day. We keep track of that. Are able to recognize our guests at a far distance, and really provide clinical services and supervision for our folks. We keep track of over 20% of our guests. We keep track of their medication. Over half of them we take to medical appointments. We have a psychiatrist on staff, so people are able to immediately get back on psych meds that maybe they were away from for many years and self-medicating with street drugs. And then so much administrative supervision in getting people phones and insurance and food stamps, helping them regain their identification, their social security card, their lost birth certificate, and then applying for housing wait lists, accompanying our guests, sitting with them through these meetings. 31 people, most of them needed one-on-one attention throughout this meeting to have assistance filling out the paperwork because literacy is quite low, and just being a calm, known supportive presence throughout that time. So we take people daily to drug treatment, to the methadone clinic, 6 people a day at this time. We have weekly laundry, movie nights, an art workshop, bike repair. So we have a lot of bringing people back to themselves, increasing that self-esteem through making sure all of our interactions involve a positive rapport, using people's names, offering compliments, fist bumps all day long, spending quality time with our guests, providing acts of service. We have a food pantry that's open 8 hours every single day, and just being present with people. So we're once people are housed, we've housed over 240 people ourselves, and more than that have found their own next best place to go. But we continue to keep up with them. We monthly are in touch with their landlord and with them, making sure the rent's being paid, utilities are being paid, that there are no people over. We go over to clean apartments, to kick people out that don't belong there, so that we're going to stay involved in people's lives because we've really committed to them. And that involves through the end of their life. we just had a memorial service last night for someone that was with us for a year and a half and then was housed for 2 years. And what's amazing is some of her family came, even though they hadn't been in touch with her for many, many years. Had a sister she hadn't been in touch with for 30 years, but wanted to come and be present. And daughters that hadn't been in touch for 5 years, but wanted to be present. And they wanted to see what her last years had been like. They thought she had been alone. They thought she had been isolated, but they found out that she had all of these people that cared about her, that kept up with her, that called her, that visited her, and they wanted to meet. They wanted to meet the folks of Motels for Now. So it's a very beautiful time with them. Thank you.
I had prepared some notes that I wanted to talk from, but due to time, and because somebody had asked a question earlier that kind of triggered me, I'm gonna just summarize my notes and then I'm gonna jump to what I want to talk about. And I have the mic. All right, so I'm with the County Police Department. I'm not a policeman, I'm not a correctional officer, I'm a social worker, I'm a civilian working within a police department. I always have to emphasize that because most people, when they see the badge and what I'm wearing, they automatically mistake me for a police officer. And most people don't want to listen to what I have to say after that. All right, so now that I've said that, I know you are all now willing to hear what I have to say. Thank you very much. All right, so the Crisis Services Unit is a civilian unit that is a brainchild of Sheriff Redmond for the purposes of mental health within the jail and the community at large. Most people think we just deal with jail inmates, but that's not true. We also deal with the community at large. Anyone who is within St. Joe County, we deal with that, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But inside of jail, we deal with the addicted, the mentally ill, and those people are mostly homeless. So what that means is they are in jail waiting to go outside somewhere to services that we have already heard are very scarce. We don't have a lot of services for the mentally ill in St. Joe County. Let's get that straight. And we also don't have a lot of other services such as shelter for the same people that we are talking about. Let that sink in as well. So when we are dealing with the people that we deal with inside of jail, what we normally do is we don't offer treatment options. We are not a treatment facility. Jail is not a treatment facility. We do have Oaklawn services inside of jail, but due to funding and maybe the contract that was signed between the jail and Oaklawn, we don't have Oaklawn mental health services 24/7 inside of jail. They come 4 hours each day, 7 days a week. And whenever I see the Oaklawn people walking in, I know they're coming to see a maximum of about 4 people because they're there for 4 hours only. And 4 hours for 4 people is not even enough. So that means we have a lot of inmates that sit in jail not being attended to because of the scarcity of workers. That's something that needs to be addressed. And we are talking the people that have mild mental illnesses, the ones that have severe or what we are considering here as, what are we calling them? Serious mental illnesses. The serious mental illness, I don't know how we are measuring serious. Every mental illness to me is serious, but the ones that are so severe to me, just sitting in jail, not getting any help, just pretty much rotting in jail. Why? Because most providers, most hospitals, most service providers are saying, you are too sick for us to handle you. We cannot handle your case. I hope that's sinking. So they wait in jail, picking up more charges while they are in jail, which means their stay in jail is actually being prolonged by staying in jail. We have people that I've been working inside of jail for almost, well, for my 4th year now. And I see people that have been there that are not going anywhere because there's no bed opening up for them anywhere. But I've also seen people that have come in and they've gone somewhere because there's a bed opening up for them, and they came after the ones that have been there longer. It's also because the service providers are picking and choosing who they want to serve. Let that sink in as well. We work with hospitals. Most of our individuals that we have in jail, when they get a chance to go to a hospital somewhere, sometimes they get attended to for 45 minutes and then they get discharged because, I don't know why. But if we do some interventions, some of our individuals stay longer in jail. I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman that was taken in jail, and when he was about to be discharged, we determined that he was not fit to go back into the public. He was 57 years old. We took him to Memorial Hospital. I am glad Memorial Hospital has come a long way understanding mental illness. When I started, I want to say, I'm sorry, Memorial Hospital was not understanding mental illness. They've come a long way. Maybe it's because they're working with social workers, and probably they're also working with people with hearts now. That's another thing. Most of the places we take our mentally ill are people who are there for a paycheck. All right, sorry to say this, but you invited me to speak. All right. So we took a gentleman there. At first, they did not want to attend the gentleman. They were trying to find excuses to discharge him while we're still there. I stood my ground, I stayed there. The gentleman has stayed there for over 3 months. They recently found him a place to go to for inpatient treatment, and he will be going either this week or next week, I'm not too sure. But it's because we had to stand up for this gentleman and for his needs. All right? Now, there are certain needs also for these mentally ill that if they are met, they will actually decrease the symptoms of mental illness. Things like offering them socks when they need socks, underwear when they need underwear, clothing, right? Shoes, things like that. Promising them shelter with motels for now. Just telling them that we put you on that list with Sheila. That makes them happy, but guess what? When they get out, Sheila may not have the bed, may not have the room. So what does that do? So we are exacerbating the illnesses of these individuals by not providing what they need. Now, let me not talk about jail anymore. Let me run to patrol. Somebody mentioned something about police officers not understanding mental illness and then arresting the mentally ill. That used to be true. Based on my understanding, it's no longer that true. But what I've seen happening is family members who do not understand mental illness, or they do understand mental illness, but they want to get rid of their own problem. So what they do is they realize that hospitals are not taking their mentally ill, so they call the police at the slightest provocation from somebody with a mental illness, knowing fully well that this person is going to act up and they are going to be taken to jail. Jail is not a place for the mentally ill. So family members need to understand that, and the family members need to educate other family members. And family members need to just grow a heart at times, just to realize that this is my problem, I have to deal with it, and I have to deal with it the best way I can. Now, being a crisis services unit, we are invited into people's homes to help with the mentally ill many times, and we do go there. I do not want to see anybody coming to jail, but there are moments when I have actually advocated for a person to come to jail. They silent. Yes, Tamar mentioned one thing that you all should have caught. She said the police officers are supposed to protect the community, and that's exactly what they will do. I work with the police, and when I see a case that makes me determine that, you know what, we need to protect the public, I will not hesitate to make that call. Recently, I made that call against the sheriff's own advice. I need you to listen to this. But 2 weeks after I made the call and the individual was in jail, some police departments from other counties came over to hand over some paperwork because the person had threatened to shoot up schools. And if that person had not come to jail, he was going to shoot up some schools, and he can shoot. All right? But we did not leave him in jail, because when I asked for somebody to come to jail, I don't want to see them in jail. So we made arrangements for the person to actually get help, and they did get the help that they needed, and now they are at their own home. They're back at home, and we are working with them from home. That's what we do. It's a part of what we do. All right, I don't know where else I want to take this, but I think I will end here and just wait for questions.
Okay, do we have any questions for either of us?
Thank you. Not necessarily a question, but a comment. You know, working with individuals with mental illness or, you know, underserved populations, it could be challenging, and, you know, let's just be real about that, because you're dealing with different situations. And so if you're not practicing good self-care, right, as a human being, you will have a sharp fuse, and some days you will not feel like doing your job. So I really just want to normalize that first, because I go through that too. One of the things though that helps me, not just self-care, but sometimes if I'm interacting with someone who is really irritated and really agitated, in the moment I ask myself, Tamara, what would you do if you had nowhere to sleep tonight? How would you behave, right? How would you respond to that? And in the moment, that gives me like empathy to kind of like not take it personal and kind of calm down a bit. And I say that because one of the most common reports I've gotten from individuals is how they were treated at different agencies. And that's just being very real. And I did it was the poverty simulation from Goodwill. And that was really powerful for me. And I remember, even though it was just a simulation, the different agencies were set up at different booth simulations, and some were supposed to be really unkind to you. And I remember when I was met with some unkindness, though it was just a simulation, it felt like it was another task to do on top of all I had going on. And at some points, I felt myself just shutting down. So imagine what it's like for somebody who is not in a simulation and actually having to complete all these tasks, right? So it goes back to what Lynn said, which is to be kind. And if in that moment you can't be kind, look into yourself and ask yourself, what would you do in this position?
Okay, well, we have a couple of questions. Each of you is providing a service that has required your organization to be creative, and we thank you for that, to meet the mental health needs of the community members you're servicing. What impact do you think your innovation is having? Example, less hospitalizations, less incarceration, and less unhoused.
I can go first. With me having worked with correctional officers, one thing I realized was the misunderstanding and the lack of understanding regarding mental illness, especially among correctional officers, because we have to know these people that we are asking to work in jail are working 16-hour shifts, and they're working inside what I call a cage or a cave, right? If you have been in jail, you know the conditions in jail. If you're working inside of a jail, it feels like you are in jail, right? And then you have people that you're working with that are defined, all they have is time to find new ways to be defined, right? So there is high stress levels among correctional officers. One thing that I decided to do was create what we call a positive jail culture. Simply making law enforcement and correctional officers realize that the people that they're working with are not per se defiant, but they are ill, they are not well. So once you understand that, you treat them differently. Once you understand the fact that these people are doing what they are doing based on what happened to them, being trauma informed, right? Then you treat them differently. So we started putting classes also for correctional officers, as well as classes for inmates. We have classes, I put up classes for inmates. I do them every Monday. These are just to ensure that our inmates are thinking positive, despite their circumstances, despite their situations.
That's really critical and essential. I've seen a large transformation in law enforcement over the 4 years that we've had Motels for now. And I think Henry's a big part of that shift and he said it so well, going from a presumption of defiance to a presumption of unwellness is critical. One big change we've seen, and we have a study with the Lucy Institute at Notre Dame with our street medicine clinic. So we have resident physicians from Memorial Hospital come out to be with us every other Thursday evening, and we've tracked based on a year the number of stays you've had in the emergency room and the number of days that you were admitted in the hospital prior to visiting, being with the street medicine clinic till the year following. And the number of days in the hospital is reduced 60%. So that's a big shift that happens. The number of stays is also down. And so that's a study we're going to continue over the next year. But it goes to what we've been saying today, that stability creates wellness. So we've definitely seen that.
I think impact is something that is important, and so a lot of what we do with the skills training piece is that we can have a lot of anecdotal of the change that we've seen for people. And so as an organization overall, that is one thing that we are striving to do now, is to just kind of document what kind of impact are we seeing so that we can see those numbers. I can say that the number of students that weren't going to be graduating from high school, the numbers that we've seen go up because we've been in their lives to be able to support them. And I can talk about stories of students coming back and saying, hey, do you remember me when I was in middle school and I was not behaving at my best and you helped me learn how to cope with some situations? Those are the kind of pieces that we see for impact right now, but we are working toward that we see more data-related impact.
In addition to what I said, we also have seen the changes in the organizations that we reach out to, especially hospitals. St. Joe Hospital, best hospital. Just gonna say that. I'm biased, I know, because there's a social worker there who we work with directly, and the social worker is phenomenal. We presented our case to her, and since then, everybody we take to St. Joe Hospital gets taken care of. And we have had a number of our people that are repeat individuals being put in other hospitals, even out of state. They have received services that are not available here because of that relationship and that understanding between partners.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Yes, I just wanted to share a story of hope. Like I wanted to end on this because it involves St. Joe Hospital, and I wanted to.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add this story as it relates to St. Joseph Hospital, because I feel like you need to recognize when positive things are happening in the community. When I was at the Center for the Homeless, there was an individual who was struggling with serious mental illness that was dying. And for like a week, I was advocating. I'm not a medical professional, but I could look at him and see He was on the way out in a lot of pain, but never complained. And for like a week, I tried to get him, and I didn't want him to be in the shelter. Cause I said, when I have the flu, I just want my bed. I don't wanna have to walk a mile to the bathroom or anything. I wanted him to be comfortable. And I remember the Friday afternoon, I was at my wit's end. My coworker said, I called the ambulance and I told them to take him to St. Joe. And I was at my wit's end, and I called St. Joe, I called the nurse. I called there and they said he was admitted. And I said, I put my case out and I said, please help us. I said, he's not complaining, but I am complaining for him. I want him to be comfortable. That was the Friday. And she said, don't worry, Tamara, we'll take care of him. And the Sunday they gave him, he wanted chicken noodle soup. They made sure he had that. And then the Monday we got a call and he asked us if we could come to the hospital. And he had gotten the word that he just had days and weeks to live, but it was really hours. And we rushed over to the hospital and they were so compassionate, and we were able to be there with him up until he died. He died with us in the room. And I was so impressed with just the level of care that they gave to this gentleman in his final hours. So just really wanted to acknowledge them for that.
Thank you so much. Let's give all of our panelists a hand. All for sharing with us this important work that you're doing with our audience on today. We want to thank you all for hanging in there with us today and for your question and answer and your participation. This has been a different summit, but a much needed conversation. And I'm really grateful for our Executive Director, Lisa Kelly, and for the Planning Committee, the hard work that everybody put in to make this happen. Let's give them all a hand.